The basic assignment around this car was to take the concept estate and put it into the V60 that we see here behind me. So in terms of surface language, theme work, styling, even from everything from the actual window graphic of being quite open, quite upright in the rear end, really paying homage to our 1800 ES that the concept estate paid homage to. So that was very influential in the design, particularly in the front end with the attitude of the headlight as it passes here, with the sort of T-bar Thor's hammer interlocking itself in the bumper itself. Is how we play the Thor's hammer difference in the low 60 cars as opposed to the XC60. We do play around with that element, sticking to Thor's hammer through the Volvo portfolio itself, but playing around with the freedom. And the XC60 connects and shoots right into the grille, and the XC40 is a little bit more of a Y shape. It's contained inside the headlamp. SMV90 also contained in the lamp. So we do like to play around with that element, but sticking true to that signature itself. Same in the rear end. We've carried on with Volvo's traditional kind of upright rear end signature, which is very, very recognizable for a Volvo itself. But playing with the end hook that goes into the trunk, which the shield in the rear is kind of held by. So again, very similar to the XC60, creating a family of cars that are much more assimilated to the feeling of an athlete. That was kind of more of the inspiration behind the vehicle as well. Where it's not to have these things be like heavy bodybuilders, but more of a runner is what I like to say, where the shape of the car is very lightweight. It has a lower belt line than today's V60 and V90 to cut a bit of the sheet metal away, emphasize its stance on the wheels, especially over the rear wheel where we have this wing that disappears into the body side. But as you see, the depth on the body side here in particular, we have a very soft shoulder section and it wraps right into the body side itself with literally kind of one feature line on the car. Now, having the incredible proportions of our SPA platform, where it's seem a little bit more extreme here than a V90 itself, since this car is actually lower, it's longer than today's V60 by 100 millimeters roughly in the wheelbase. A lot of that went into that premium dash to axle proportion, but it increased the legroom in the rear to be best in class. Another big, strong aspect of this vehicle was how upright do we make this rear end. This car is not only replacing today's V60, but also the V70 as well. So the V70 being very, very upright, and the V90 being a bit more stylish with a faster angle in the rear. And we did play around with a lot of different angles and hit a magic sweet spot in the rear with not being a total upright and not being leaned forward too much. But that in combination with the open window graphic itself suggests to the customer and consumer that there is a lot of space, which there actually is in this vehicle.
The thing about Scandinavian design is it's really important to incorporate natural materials. And we work very closely with our color material designers. They provide inspiration, influences, and bring materials to us. And we equally start with a design theme, and we'll shade it kind of how we see fit. We join together and we come up with the best proposal. So we often have to work very much with the geometry for the material that we're going to apply to it. A really good example is this shape in the architecture. This is really extreme in shape for a wood natural grain to follow. And that's because it has two dimensions of curvature. It has a very strong curvature in this direction, and it's also crowned across its section. And to make the grain follow that without splitting is very difficult. So we had a very dedicated team of engineering and design together to make this work for the quality that we needed. So we spent a lot of time fettling that surface to get it just right for the property of the wood. The same with the leather. When you dress a surface in leather, it has to have a purity to be able to be dressed in the leather property. The difference between S90 is that the chrome architecture runs around the top in like a C shape at the end, and so that gives it more of an enclosed feel. Another difference between the S90 is the chrome is very thick and solid in section, and it changes in section as well quite dynamically. But as a profile, it runs in a very straight, more formal attitude across the instrument panel, which gives it a stately formal appeal. Again, with this section of the very much more solid wood, big volumes of solid wood. The panoramic roof here, it comes from the V90. So it's a big roof for this car, the size of the V60. Also the side windows are 15 millimeters taller, in fact, than the V90. And that creates a more lightweight proportion of the body on the exterior. And it also lets a lot more light into the cabin. And that's true to Scandinavian principles as well. You see it in the architecture in the homes, with the big windows really drawing in sunlight and making the best of the space.
With the 60 cluster, obviously this is not a V90, it's a V60. So the character that we tried to capture in the entire 60 cluster was this athlete that I said. So with the V90 being a more one line on the body side, more of a land yacht, a relaxed, formal approach, totally appropriate for the segment it's in. But this being a much more driver-focused and oriented customer for this vehicle in particular. Which is why, particularly in the front end here, we have these lower wings in the front that actually help pull the visual expression of the car down to the road. And they're even expressively accented here with chrome elements for the inscription that also pull the car down to the ground. I mean, it is scalable platform architecture for Spa. So again, it's a lot of similarities, but we have a little bit more extreme proportion. This is probably the most refined car that we have in our portfolio so far, in terms of surface tension and line work. It had a lot of time and learnings from all the other vehicles itself, and we get sort of better and better every time, more refined and more refined in that premium aspect. One detail in particular that you see on the rear here is we've separated the rear reflex from the lamp itself. To make that lamp smaller, take that reflex out of the lamp, since it is a legal requirement for a surface area. Took it out of the lamp to make that lamp on the smaller side on the rear end in this vehicle.
As with all of our other Spa cars, it's important to get a pure, clean theme for the interior. That's just a couple of key lines which really describe the theme. For us, it's the top roll line and it's the silk metal line. And as with the other cars, we start with the technology. We put that in first. And then in between the technology, between the screen and the vent, we really use the silk metal to squeeze the proportion of the instrument panel. And that's to create a very lightweight proportion, which is important for this car, which is a dynamic athlete. It's a driver's car connected to the road, along with the low seating position. Also, to add to that lightness, we've reduced the sections of wood. They're smaller, lighter sections than our other Spa cars, still using the same premium materials, but in a lighter way, which means we can now thin down the chrome as it comes under the screen. XC60, you will see, has a similar theme, which was inspired by the concept cars to have this horizontal ribbon of wood through the interiors. So XC60 started with that, and it was important for us to keep the 60 cars together as a cluster, using this very strong theme on this car. But the difference, as I say, is XC60 has the wood under the screen here, and it has the wood up the side of the end vent, and that makes the proportion much deeper, more solid, more vertically stretched for the type of car that is the SUV. So here it was really about light, refined elegance to really slim down these chrome sections. I think, given that this is Volvo's estate car, it has a long tradition, a long history for the brand. It's a very good car in that you get the sporty, elegant dynamics, particularly in the front, particularly in the drivability. And in the rear compartment, we've really focused on the comfort, the space, maximizing the luggage volume. This is a very practical but stylish car as a whole.
This V60 is one of our most refined products in our portfolio, probably the most refined. We have a phenomenal engineering team and studio engineering team, which we worked heavily on some aspects of the Spa platform here to change a couple things that allowed us to, in particular, get a lot more refined treatment into this vehicle. As this vehicle is much smaller than a V90, there were aspects to change on this vehicle. One of the biggest things is actually the position of the door hinge itself. So you see quite a deep body side. where traditionally we had the hinge probably in the deepest point, and we were able to, after quite a lot of testing and looping and work together with the studio engineer who was physically sitting next to me at that time, I was quite heavily involved, to change that door hinge location and move it down in position, which allowed us to push the section of the door in very deep and pull the area of the hinge out. So that's the widest point of the car down there, which again allows you to get this character of a deep, deep body side. To push that through, it was basically building one version that didn't have it and building another version that did have it. And it was pretty much clear night and day to everyone involved that we have to really go for this and do that direction on this car. So that's just one example of a couple things and aspects on this vehicle that separate it from other cars in our portfolio, and how we continually progress and change and develop. We don't just sit on what we have, we're striving for perfection for the next car, each car that we do, in terms of design language, design execution, and also engineering execution. In my new role at Concept and Design Center in California, it's quite an exciting opportunity to actually look at the entire car as a whole. So not doing just exterior design or just interior design, but leading the team there that does from all aspects: user experience, user interface design, engineering, studio engineering, concept engineering, interior and exterior design, all together to make a collective proposal, looking at 10, 15 years out there in that studio and seeing what we can pull back into our next generation production cars themselves.